In Part 2, Chapter 64 of Don Quixote, the Don is forced to stay in Barcelona, where he meets the Knight of the White Moon. This new knight challenges Don to a duel over the beauty of his lady, whoever she may be. If Don Quixote wins, he can cut off the knight's head and take his horse and armor. If the Knight of the White Moon wins, Don Quixote has to retire from knighthood for a full year. Don Quixote agrees. The battle is brief, and Don Quixote is soundly defeated and carried back to Don Antonio's house. In Part 2, Chapter 65, Don Antonio follows the Knight of the White Moon and discovers he's none other than Samson Carrasco. Samson explains that he's trying to rid Don Quixote of his insanity, which Don Antonio thinks is a bad idea. Nevertheless, he promises to support the young scholar. Don Quixote stays in bed at Don Antonio's house for 6 days, and Sancho Panza tries to cheer him up. When they leave for home, Don Quixote wears regular clothing, his armor carried by Sancho's donkey. In Part 2, Chapter 66, Don Quixote and Sancho Panza travel for 5 days and come to an inn where there's a dispute between two men who wish to run a race. Sancho Panza offers himself as judge, impressing the onlookers with his sound advice. The next day, they run into the footman whom Don Quixote beat in battle at the Duke and Duchess's castle, who tells Don Quixote that he received 100 lashes for disobeying the Duke's orders. Doña Rodriguez's daughter went to a convent, and Doña Rodriguez herself went back to Castile. Don Quixote thinks so highly of himself and the realm of knighthood that he can't fathom how he could be responsible for so much damage when he has such good intentions. Good intentions, as Cervantes is quick to point out, doesn't mean Don Quixote is in the right. Sancho Panza practically sees the light go out of his master following his defeat by the Knight of the White Moon. Expectations roused by his new promises totally undone, swept away like smoke in the wind. Don Quixote no longer fully believes in himself, and that formerly unshakable belief was the one thing that propelled him along his journey.